Hi everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Dublin Tech Talks. It's all about leadership today. We'd like to always thank our partners Merz & Meyer and WorkHuman. We are going to be talking to Barbara Monaghan and Sharon Damel, who are leadership specialists within startups. We're going to be discussing the power of leadership and the power of brand. I say it in the show and I'll say it again here. I'm a secret leadership geek. It's something that is one of my favourite places for learning. We talk everything around the evolving leadership space, from managers to leaders, how important that is within startups specifically, about how a leader can evolve into founder into leader, from a co-worker into leadership, how important that is. Barbara discusses everything around the brand aspect. It's a space that I never really thought about, but it's all about projecting the company's brand through its leader and onto the market. Really interesting episode and we hope you enjoy. Sharon Damel, Barbara Monaghan, welcome to Dublin Tech Talks. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to talk about leadership and the power of brand today, and I'm actually geekily super excited about this because I really enjoy leadership. I really enjoy brand, and I love how it's kind of evolved over the last while. So we'll start with a bit of introductions. Sharon, do you want to start?
So I specialize in leadership for scaling companies. I work primarily with leaders who are stepping into new roles, and the organization wants them to accelerate that process. And I'm also very passionate about intercultural communication, and that's based on my own experience. So very often nowadays, leaders are no longer dealing with monocultural teams. Not only geographically are they dispersed, but also if they are enough in the office, then they can be quite diverse, and giving them tools and strategies to be able to get the best out of their teams, because diversity does bring innovation to a whole new level. But if you don't have the ability to be able to harness that, then it can become very disruptive.
Yeah, 100%. Barbara?
I call myself a harmonious disruptor because I will quietly challenge traditional business thinking to bring businesses forward into their futures. Developing the brand, developing how they communicate the brand, how the whole thing comes together, and speaking to their audience in a way that their audience, it means something, it adds value to their audience. So that's what I do. I do it through workshops, collaborative workshops, and Is it mainly workshop based, coaching based? What time? It's a bit of both. I do the collaborative workshops, and then I bring it together into what I call a brand manifesto. It's basically a document that you can guide everything by. So that document will then feed into your marketing, feed into your PR, feed into your content creation, and all of that stuff. I don't want to just give that to people and leave them stranded. So I do actually do brand coaching as well. So I will work with people on a continual basis as long as they need me to communicate the brand.
Okay, brilliant. As I said, I'm excited about this one. So leadership in general. So obviously 20 years ago, it wasn't called leadership, it was called management. And it was being more kind of do what I've told you to do, and obviously it has evolved into a more collaborative environment, and leaders are seen as people that you want to go at North flags and all that kind of stuff. So what are your thoughts? We'll start back to Sharon. What are your thoughts on kind of where leadership has been and where it's gone, and the effects of that on organizations that have adapted into that kind of collaborative environment, especially say startups that have probably easier to do it versus maybe more monolithic businesses that may have struggled and needed that coaching or needed that world of kind of realization that leadership has changed. So I'll leave it there, a very open-ended question.
Indeed. You're right. It has changed enormously, certainly from when I was a young leader. My first role was managing people, and I was a subject matter expert, but I had no idea about performance management. In fact, the company I worked for at the time had just introduced performance management, and we were treating it as a tick box exercise. We didn't realise the importance of those powerful moments where listening to your people, understanding what their dreams are, what their aspirations are, and how important that piece is in terms of motivation and the opportunity to share your vision and feedback and recognition. No idea. It was like, did you do whatever X and did you achieve your goals at the end of the month? Thanks very much. And it was based on years of service. That's how we, it was in the good old days. But thankfully things have moved on now. But I think certain things have happened in the last couple of years, which we've all had that shared experience and trauma at times with COVID and with the Ukraine, where it's dramatically changed how we work now, where we're now looking at remote leadership, hybrid leadership, and people really struggle with that piece. Particularly people who are dynamic leaders who really rely on their personality. They're the ones cajoling people and they really enjoy talking to people. You miss out on so much. And how do you create that sense of belonging that you matter when you only talk to people maybe once a week? How do you, and particularly when, I think that was a big impact of poor leadership during COVID, when you had a huge issue was retention. You had what they call the massive resignations happening all over the place. And you saw the outcome of poor leadership. Yeah. And not necessarily poor leadership, it's just people didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know what to do. Barbara calls herself the harmonious disruptor. I call myself the practical enabler. People didn't have there's just basic tools and they struggle. So what they did was most of us do, and certainly what I did as a young leader is I did the work myself. Yeah. I didn't want to be asking people because I knew that they were struggling and I was whatever. So there's a lot of different challenges facing leadership today. I think AI is going to have a huge impact. Because it's very easy to be busy doing stuff. And at the end of the day, you have your nice to-do list. But at what point during that day did you inspire, did you motivate, did you connect with somebody to help them feel like they're part of the team? Did you help them to understand how they and what they do impacts on the overall objectives and the vision of the organisation? And that's the difference between management and leadership.
And I'll back and forth on this in my head. Like leadership to me is a thought skill or learned skill. And for the talk we're doing later tonight, I asked people, did they get people who are attending about formal training within leadership? And like 2/3 haven't.
Absolutely.
So like I would have guessed it might have been a bit higher, like half, but 2/3 haven't. And I think that's just such a disaster when it comes to like an organization where if you're trying to bring in a brand of a leader and this what you're trying to do is how you coach somebody to lead is very difficult. Like it's not, you can come in as like a lot of people are turned on the next day of like you've got your promotion, you were a lead, but suddenly you're next week you're coming in as manager of 4 divisions. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult because you're putting them into that. They're subject matter experts. They're so good at what they do. And I work with leaders who are the brightest in their fields. And yet, all of a sudden, they don't know how to, do what they need to do to show up as a leader. And it's very distressful for them and very overwhelming for them. So people will default to, what I experience is they'll default to what they think leadership is. They'll default to a boss that they used to have and think, oh, if that's what a leader looks like, then I'll just copy them. But when you copy somebody else's leadership style, and that's something Barbara and I have been collaborating on, is all you're doing, you're never going to be your best because that's somebody else's best. Yeah. And that's really, really important. And it's giving, because at the end of the day, if you really believe that your people have the potential, you have to give them the support network that they need. And the conversations that I have with the people who engage me are saying they need to influence more. They need to be able to deal with conflict. They need to be able to collaborate across, the organisation. They need to think more strategically. So that's what I get asked to work with them on. Yeah. But what they say to me is, how do I go from buddy to boss? Yeah. Like, I was out on the beer with these guys last Friday night, and now all of a sudden I'm responsible for their performance review. Yeah. But that's a mindset shift, where you say to them, if the shoe was on the other foot, how would you want them to show up for you? They have aspirations, they have desires about where they want to take their career. So it's your responsibility to show up for them. It's interesting, Mackenzie's did this really interesting study where they looked at what are the common traits of great leadership. And there's 4 that all of the leaders have. And then the rest was down to individual style. So the 4 basic ones are perspective taking, problem solving, support and mentor your team. And the last one is delivering results. So that's the 4 things they all had. And then the rest was down to their individual style. Some are people leaders, some are change leaders, some are thought leaders. And that's where we, can help them to really unpack that. And it's such a game changer for people because they realise I work with a lot of what I call reluctant leaders. So these are the subject matter experts.
I was about to say startup world moving from a founder to leader to a CEO of a substantial business is
daunting.
There isn't that many successes at the CEO level or MD. They might get pushed off as the business grows, as the money comes in.
Yeah, I think they're so busy focusing on the customer at the beginning, which is what all startups do. 80% of the focus is on the customer, 20% on the people. But then as you grow, as your business grows and becomes more successful, in order to continue to deliver your customer, you then need to shift the focus to people. And if you're a tech specialist or an engineering specialist, do you remember the part of the course where they spoke about how to motivate, how to inspire, how to deal with conflict, how to delegate, how to, there isn't much focus on those courses. And they find themselves in that difficult situation.
Yeah, 100%. And Barbara, the brand side of that, or even the person side, how is that coached?
Yeah.
Is that an assessment-led way, or what way do you do that, sorry?
So I would, just to go back to a point that Sharon made there about the 80-20. So at startup phase, it's 80% on your customers. And then when it comes to the scale-up phase, it's 20% on your customers. And that's where you're going to lose customers, So, big time. So the thing about developing a brand, you've got to know yourself first of all as a leader. You've got to know who you are, what your strengths are, where can you add value, how can you show up, and how can you create meaning. So it's about doing that for your employees and looking after your employees. Because if you can get that right and you can build a culture where everybody's involved, everybody is, really wanting this business to succeed, then that will automatically go out to your customers. They will see it. If you've got a purpose, if you're driven by that purpose, your customers will see that and it'll all come back in the same way. So it's about building that culture. It's about developing your own style of leadership, knowing where the gaps are, and having a brand that will guide you and a purpose that will guide you towards your destination.
Interesting. And the brand side, sorry, this is just especially with what's gone on kind of Q, like back end of 22 and started 23 with layoffs and stuff like that. As a leader, when you're implementing changes to your organization like that, how does that affect the mindset of your employees, and how do you bring that back onto a brand? So if you've brought people on this journey, say one of the fangs that have brought you along and that you've been a part of their family and people feel you're part of the family, and suddenly there's layoffs and the family has been disrupted, that has to be a change of kind of mindset for your team. And how, as a leader, how do you get back on brand, or how do you get back into the safety zone?
Yeah, it's difficult.
And sorry, I'm asking that question because that's what I've seen. People now that are either leaving companies or joining companies, they might be reluctant because they're like, well, they said they were this and they did this, not. But so what is it?
Yeah, but they're not. It's actually, it starts with, okay, so you know who you are as a leader. You know your own strengths, you know your own weaknesses. And then going into the business, you know what the business needs to do. You know where the brand is with the business. So it's about, if you can build that culture piece collaboratively, it starts with the values. So you've got to, it's like a lot of people say, oh yeah, we've got values, we've got them up on the wall and it's all about honesty and integrity. And to be honest, yawn. That's not what it's about. It's about values that can be, actionable, that are in the company, that you can use, that you can do immediately. And that's how you behave. You behave according to those values. So that values will then allow you to know how you're going to get to your purpose. So that's what I call your mission. So you've got a vision for the business. How are you going to do it? So that's your mission and vision. And then that all feeds up into the purpose at the top of the pyramid. Your purpose never changes, but everything you do should be guided by the purpose. I can give you an example.
Please do, yeah.
if you heard recently the story about Patagonia, Patagonia is an incredible brand. They fed into the values. The business owners had values. They had standards. They fed that into the business. That became the values and the standards of the business. Their purpose is in business to save our home planet. And everything they did was going towards saving the planet. They developed a second-hand range of clothing, which is called Worn Wear. Yeah. They're quite activist as well, so they had little messages sewn in under their labels, political messages and stuff like that. You know, just things like that they did. That was part of their thing. That was what they were doing. And as they left the business, they set up a charity, and the charity's sole purpose is to plough every profit from Patagonia back into saving the planet. That's what you call a brand.
They would be an outlier, wouldn't they? In my thoughts. So you'd look at all the successful companies. I'm not going to say all, but the majority of successful companies. They came with a purpose. Yeah. We'll take Meta as our use case here, was to share an environment and everybody to get to know each other. Money comes into the organisation and they get shareholders. And that purpose changes straight away. They become a revenue-generating business with stakeholders.
They've lost their purpose. They've lost sight of the vision.
You have to, as a leader there, not every company's going to get to a Meta size, but as an organisation grows, how as a leader or as an organisation do you adapt to that? Because that's where every scale-up company wants to get to. But once you take that investment in day one, your purpose kind of changes to...
Shouldn't, yeah.
So it's a very difficult balance to try and get, and we all can't be a Patagonia, we all can't be Meta. Like there has to be a middle ground. But as a leader of scale-ups, do you see that changing them, and then back to the purpose and the brand and everything that goes with that, is that middle ground that's just really difficult to deal with?
It is difficult, and it really does come down, like, your purpose should never change. Your mission and your vision can change, but your purpose should never change. So, you know, in business to save our home planet, everything you do should be guided to that. And if you've got a good brand, the shareholders that you take on, etc., should also believe in this. And if they don't, you shouldn't be doing it.
But then you suddenly have people that have invested in your business and want a return in the end. So being that type of company does fundamentally change how an organisation goes.
Yeah. You know, when it comes to leadership, I think, first of all, I believe that, you know, true leadership, if you think about people who inspired you in your own personal life, there is no permanent job anymore. Like, nobody has a job for life. But I think that your employees and the people who work with you are the best ambassadors you could ever have. So businesses will, you know, there's very few unicorns out there. That's why they're called unicorns. But there is a lot of very successful businesses that have ridden the waves of COVID and the Ukraine and everything else that will come at them. And it's because they believe in not just their brand, but also they believe in their people. Yeah. And when you believe in people, you're also recognizing, like, there's constant change happening, constant uncertainty. So just like we have to adapt and learn in our personal lives, so too do businesses, and leaders have to adapt. And what worked well, like, that's the whole thing, is why scale-ups struggled so much, is that they apply, you know, what got you to where you are today will not get you to where you want to go in the future. And you reach that critical inflection point where things like investment, money, people, processes all have to change. And the secret to that is your people are the leaders and how they interact with the teams and what impact they have. I think Peter Senegay has a great quote about, you know, when a bird is sitting on a tree, they're not worried about the branch breaking because they believe in themselves and their ability to fly, regardless of what happens to us. And I think, you know, this is very aspirational. This is my, you know, idea. But if you have an organization that believes in the people and helps them to grow and develop and meet the challenges that come at them and recognize, you know, okay, AI is coming. How's that going to impact us? You know, there's a lot of fear out there, and managing people through massive change and fear is up to the leader, but that's not something we studied in the books. There's no Harvard, like they just don't.
There has to be a Harvard Business Review on it.
Absolutely. There definitely is. But that comes down to things like emotional intelligence and empathy and cultural intelligence and customer intelligence. And it's, if the focus is all on the financials and there's no space, like one of the things I see is, people they don't even have time for one-to-ones. Like the simple things, the magic dust happens in regular one-to-ones. People say, talk to your people, find out what's going on in their world. I think there's been a huge learning curve over the last couple of years.
Is that an excuse because we went remote and people felt that you didn't have to do the basics anymore?
Yeah, I think, and that's where the great look. And I was working recently with somebody who told me they spoke with their team once a month. If they could see me, they would have seen me falling off the chair. It's like, because at the end of the day, remote, hybrid, face to face, regardless, people want to feel like they belong, that they matter, and that they have psychological safety, not job safety, psychological safety.
Yeah.
And that only happens through building trust. And trust only happens through regular communication and consistency. And if that's not happening, if your leaders, their only focus is to do their tick list and what they have to focus on, and they don't see the people part of their role as strategic, as critical, that's where the wheels are going to come off. And that's where people don't manage change. That's where they don't manage the scale-up piece very well. Because human nature is, we don't like feeling uncomfortable. They say that the statistic is 70% should be in your comfort zone and 30% in your stretch zone.
Okay.
So think about what you're doing in your own role and what part of that is different every day. And if it's the other way around, all you're doing is you're triggering your stress response, and you're not showing up at your best when you're stressed out. Yeah,
I did the IMI leadership course, and one of the things there was the people you're learning from, and you get to a point where, are these people going to bring me to the next part of my career? Yes or no? And I thought that was a great way of thinking about. Like, my job is about finding people new jobs or coaching them around their career paths as well, and it's. That line to me stuck with me forever. It's like, okay, are you in the organization where you'll be better in 5 years? And especially junior people coming up, they're so quick to move. And I'm always like, but what's wrong? What are you missing? What's that bit of that if you move to a next company, what are you doing? And it does come back to, will I learn from the people in front of me quicker here or if I went somewhere else? And it's a massive part of it.
Absolutely. People want to be developed. That's what the key thing. People will stay because of the developmental opportunities and not for the money. It's actually, I was working with a company the last year or so, and I said to them, am I your secret retention weapon? And he said, yes, you are, Sharon. And I know that because the leaders I was working with, he said, Sharon, I've been getting offers on LinkedIn. It's so easy. And it was much better money. And I said, why didn't you take it? He said, because when I asked them what were their development plans for me, they said there were none. So how many scale-ups, and that's the problem with scale-ups, is that they've so many balls, they're literally juggling so many different things at one time. And it's when you look at the short-term focus and not the long-term focus where you forget that the only way that we're going to deliver and grow and develop this business and be successful is if we take our people with us. Yeah. And you can't stop people walking away. That's going to happen. But if they walk away saying, wow, that is an amazing company to work for, I'm sorry I left, or, that's what you want to create.
It's very unusual, and that people journey that startups or scale-ups take on a senior people officer before 50 hires. And I find that bonkers, because you're hiring, say, 20, 30 people, and there's no people strategy around that. And that's the most important. They're the people that are your bedrock of your company, and the focus is to get the engineers in, and you can't incorporate your culture, you can't bring in your brand, you can't do any of that unless there's somebody, and a founder CEO at 30, 40 people is going to be too busy to focus on that. And I find that crazy and that's
where you need a chief brand officer. Because you need to implement all of this. You need to, to have that retention, to have that brand advocacy within the company, you need to have somebody managing the brands. And I've recently spoken to somebody who is taking on a chief brand officer, and hopefully we'll see more of it here soon.
And okay, chief brand, new job title. I like these. That's purely focusing on the internal.
No, external as well.
External.
Oh no, brand is everything. Brand is internal and external, and it's marrying both of those together.
What skill set's that? Sorry, I'm not trying to be flippant there. Is that like a marketing background?
No, it's not marketing.
People?
It's it comes before all of that. So it touches every aspect of the business. Brand touches every aspect of the business. And as Sharon said, you need intuition and empathy in the boardroom as well as the spreadsheets and the numbers. So brand is actually touching every aspect. It's figuring out who you are, why you do what you do beyond making money. It's figuring out who the target audience is. Why do they want you? Why does it matter to them? So you're trying to marry all of that together. You're trying to figure out how you're going to show up.
Yeah.
How you're going to show up to your audience, how you're going to show up to your employees. How involved are your employees in the business?
I love that. So it's like the tone and voice.
It's everything. Okay, yeah, it's the character, the tone, the voice, the values, and building that culture and doing it collaboratively, which is, breaking down the silos.
Wow, okay. There you go. Something new today. Yeah, I love that as an idea, as a brand officer internally and externally.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
Yeah.
The more we go.
Yeah.
That probably comes back to one of the points that brought the training side, which right in your wheelhouse here. So why is there a reluctance for companies? You might say there isn't, but for bringing people in externally to train people within brand, within leadership, is do you see a reluctance, or is it just a time element that people don't feel it's the right thing?
They don't understand it.
Okay.
They don't understand it. And that's the biggest issue, I think.
In what way?
When I talk about it, I have to talk a lot about it and I have to educate people.
Yeah.
But they don't actually see it. They don't actually see that they need brand until you show it to them. And then they realise, oh, actually, yeah, that does make sense. But, they just
What would a red flag be internally that you're kind of going, crap, I need to sort this out now?
It's the communication piece usually. They usually find that they're not connecting. They might jump to the short-term fixes because that's what people do naturally. The human nature is that we want a solution. So they jump to the short-term fixes and they start creating loads of content and they start jumping to marketing plans and they start jumping to PR. But if you think about the microphone, as we are here, is that microphone projecting the right voice for the brand, for the company, for you? And if it's not, it usually isn't until you've done the brand work first. So doing the brand work first will make sure that you get all the pieces right, the jigsaw fits together properly. And then when you use the microphone, you're projecting the right voice and therefore you're attracting the right audience.
Okay, brilliant. I'm glad this has been recorded so I can take my own notes. And Sharon, what would you see as the kind of the pivot point where in a scale up, should a founder always have somebody they can have a confidant as a coach or that side, or when you're building out your team, what stage should a leadership consultant type person be engaged? And when is it too late?
I think when you're able to share two pizzas, when you're sitting around the garage table, it's great because you're feeding off each other. You're inspired by each other. It's as soon as you start introducing layers and the very thing that has you in that role, it's your subject matter expertise, whatever that is, how much of that involves the capability to lead people. And I think that we lead from what we think is what we like. So everybody's different. Some people give me a task and I'll go off and do it and don't interrupt me till I'm finished because that's what I like to do. I'm very focused. I don't like interruptions. Other people will want regular, communication. They want, to be able to check in. Everybody's different in how they want. And I think I always say to people is you don't need to know everything. All you need to do is ask. Ask people, what does good communication look like to you? When it comes, one of the things that people dread the most is feedback. How do I do feedback? How do I do a performance review?
360
it's like
feedback's never pretty.
They'd much rather, remove the tea stains from the teaspoons in the kitchen than give the feedback. And And again, because they think they have to have all the answers. And, you know, no, you don't.
Yeah.
What you do need to do is ask, because also that's something that is affected by culture. So depending on where you're from, depending on your background, good feedback to you might be, you know, 3 positives and 1 negative. In another culture, it could be, you know, just tell me what I'm doing wrong so I can fix it. I don't want any of the, you know, of the positive things, because, and that can be very challenging. So you don't need to go and study every different culture in the world. You don't need to, you know, try and second guess every second person. Ask them.
Yeah.
And that can be done at the onboarding stage. I think like your organizations like you can play a huge role in that, in helping the client to understand, you know, what do these people like in terms of how they like to be communicated within the team. You know, often I get asked, you know, they need to speak up more. And that's where the introverts in the team, you know, because we think that people aren't speaking up, if we look at it through our lens, is because they're disengaged or they're not interested or they have nothing to add. And when you shine the lens of culture on that, it could be that in their culture, the boss, you don't speak up in front of the boss. You don't say things in front of the team about, you know, what they might perceive to be criticism. Yeah. So it's not about you having to know all of this stuff. It's about you taking the time to get to know people and ask them the right questions. And that's challenging and that's hard, but it's so worth it, because when you invest in understanding your people as a leader, it doesn't matter what level you're at, ask them, you know, think what affects us is communication, feedback, even how we persuade. What does good, negative, what does conflict look like in your team? And always giving them, you know, let's get it all out on the table, guys. And as soon as new people come in, then it's time to review it again, because the assumption is, you know, that's what culture is how we do things around here. The assumption is that everybody else will see, oh, this is how we do things around here. But maybe I'm from a place where I don't appreciate, you know, you calling me out at a meeting. Yeah. So it's having that, it's pressing. I always say to people, slow down to speed up. It is so worth spending the time getting to know people, asking the questions, and as team spending time together and agreeing what, you know, on our charter, you know, how do we do things in our team? Yeah. How do we criticize each other? How do we show up for each other? Unpacking all of those things. I know that word, everybody hates that word, unpacking, but it is actually literally that. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be complicated. I think Barbara and I were Googling how many leadership books were out there. You know, it's overwhelming. It broke the internet, it did. Like, it's something like 40 million, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well,
where do you start?
Every time there was like, there's a book here. I was like, here, I don't that.
And that's what I think what we're doing is really that we break it down into bite-sized pieces, you know, because people are so busy. They're juggling so many balls. There's so many things that they have to get right. Empower them, give them practical tools that they can walk away, try this out, see how it works, and then come back and let's try the next piece. And that's a hell of a lot more empowering and impactful, I believe, because they don't have time. You know, if you tell them, oh, you have to go off and do an MBA, you're like, oh my God, my wife or my partner's going to divorce me, my kids are going to leave me, don't mind my partner. It's a huge amount of time and investment, and it's well worth it, don't get me wrong. But let's give them easy, quick solutions that they feel, I'm making progress, I've got this.
Brilliant. So before we finish up, we got talking because you're going to be doing an event for us later tonight, Unleashing Leadership and Brand Strategy for Scaling Success. What would people expect if they are to engage you? What is the kind of the 3-4 takeaways that you'd get from an event like tonight, or if they were to engage you as a partnership?
I think if they come along tonight, they will definitely see more about how leadership and brand are intersecting and why it matters to bring the two of them together. And if they engage with us, we will offer them a collaborative workshop where we will bring leadership and brand together. We'll work through some strategies, some exercises, to get them to the point that they need to be at. So we'll look at building that trust. We'll look at building the perception, what perception they want to put out there. We will look at, their purpose and the culture that they're looking to build and all those kind of things. So we look at all aspects of it and get them to a point. We have an online course where we will bring them personally as leaders to a point where they can call themselves a harmonious disruptor or a practical enabler or similar. But, well, they will get to know themselves as leaders.
Perfect. I will put all the dates that you have your courses on when this comes out, so we'll have all that there, so there'll be no problem. Sharon, Barbara, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, and I'm actually really looking forward to it tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking your time out, and it's been such a really interesting conversation. There's so much more we could talk about, but unfortunately time has got the better of us. Thank you very much for being on Dublin Tech Talks.
Thank you. Thanks a million.